Our speaker is Don Matthews. He's a technical manager for Pavement Recycling Systems.
Okay, so Dan talked to you about a little bit about cold in place recycling. I'm going to carry that forward a little bit on cold central plant recycling, but then talk about the RAP and used in other aggregate sources. Most people use RAP in hot mix, but you can't use as much as you remove in the hot mix. The other thing is there's a very small percentage. So the question is why do we squander this aggregate? Because it's, as Dan says, it's hard to get new pits. RAP, if you look at it from a structural standpoint, it's got really good characteristics. It's some of our better aggregates. Right now we're importing aggregates from other countries because our aggregate sources are drying out. And when you use it in paper preservations, it tends to look a little bit better. It lasts a little bit longer. It has really good binding characteristics. So today I'm going to talk about cold central plant recycling, RAP chip seals, RAP slurry seals and microsurfacing, and RAP cape seals. So as Dan said, cold central plant recycling is just clean RAP into a new pavement. There's three ways you can do it. You can do it on site. You can have your project where you set up a plant nearby, you mill off the RAP, and you recycle right there and put it right back in the same road. The other is you can set up one project and take the RAP from another project. So you can actually take that, you can have a mill and fill on one job, take that over and take it to another project. The third, and this is the one that's starting to get prevalent, is because of all these RAP stockpiles that agencies are having or hot mix are having, is you can mix it, just do a central plant where you take all the different RAPs from different projects and use it in a central location. So on site, you mill it. Somebody asked why you might want to use it. Well, the second slide is why we typically use it if you need to get in and fix the subgrade. So we can go in, cut deeper, put in an aggregate base. We can soil stabilize that, add cement or lime, improve that. LA County does it quite a bit where they strip off the AC, they go in and lime treat or soil cement the subgrade to get a better structure, and then they use this as the base layer of the asphalt and then a thin asphalt, hot mix asphalt layer cap. The second is you just take, we had several jobs for the county where Caltrans was milling it off. We took all that RAP off that site, we went over, stockpiled it, and then paved a whole bunch of county roads with their product. And then the third is where you just stockpile it all from different sources and then make it individually for individual projects. Typically, you can just scalp it, 1 inch, inch and a half, depends on what the specification is. So you just get the oversize pulled off and then use the underlying material or smaller materials. As Dan showed, you can set up a typical cold in place recycling multi-unit train where you can crush it and screen it all together in one application. Or the third is you can fractionate it. So you can actually do a gradation and form your gradation because you can screen it out into different components. The other thing that you can do if you want is you can supplement it with new aggregates. So cold in place recycling, an excellent process, is used all over the country. We do a lot in California. We do 15 projects a year, probably just for the state of California. It's kind of funny when people talk about low volume roads. In California, our low volume road is typically 30,000 ADT for the highways. I would love to put 4 inches HMA on top of it, but we typically recycle 3 inches and put in a 1/10 HMA cap on those type of roads all the time. What's nice about this is we can set up for specific gradations, you can add new aggregates. If you're missing an aggregate, you can do a central plant location and you can add new aggregates and you can segregate it again back into a real graded mix. Same binders, I'm not going to go through this. Emulsions, foam, you can add lime, you can add cement, all in that process. When you mix it, you can mix it with a multi-unit train like this, or you can crush and screen the aggregates first and just use any Pugmill. Again, why it's starting to get more popularity is because you don't need the special equipment. You can crush, screen the material, and then just bring a standard Pugmill in. I'm going to give you just a couple of construction things. You should sweep and tack it before you lay it down, just like you would an HMA. We pave it. You can see the density of the roads that we have over in here. We do it in traffic all the time. Again, just a couple hours. Then release that lane. Roll it with real heavy equipment. Then we just fog seal it. We typically fog seal it and sand it because we have a lot of traffic and we don't want that fog seal getting picked up. So we release the traffic the same day. You can see this is Highway 111, just a few hours after we completed it. The one thing I will say is we typically always, if it's a foam, we don't do it. With an emulsion, we re-roll it. We found excellent, better performance by re-rolling the mix after it's cured a little bit right before the HMA. And as Dan said, you're going to seal it with something. Low volume roads, we'll put a microsurfacing or chip seal on it. We may put a thin lift HMA on top of it. All depends on what your traffic is and your location. So here's a typical example where the city of Menifee, we stripped off the AC, came in, soil cemented the roads. They had a poor structural section. Then we placed 3 inches of the cold central plant, and they put in an 1.5 inch HMA cap on top of it. Here's an application where we took all of the wrap from a major road project, and we went over to a big auto auction, and all we did was recycled it 3 inches and put a slurry seal on top of it for the auto auction. So now what I'd like to do is talk about wrap as an aggregate source used in pavement preservation. The first I'm going to talk about is wrap as a chip seal. And I want you to kind of take a look at it because this is the concept that kind of affects the performance on it. When you size down this material, you're going to get some of the individual stone off to the left. But as you keep sizing it, you may get some conglomerations, and it depends on the binder stiffness that you're dealing with. If it's a very old oxidized binder, you're going to get a lot of conglomerations. When it's a softer binder, you're going to get not as many conglomerations. But either way, it's going to work. And it actually, those conglomerations actually lead to a better performance of the roadway at the end for chip seals. So we make 2 types of chips. We make what we call our 3/8 inch chip, and we make a 5/16. We don't want to make a bigger, larger 1/2 inch chip because you're going to get a lot more conglomerations. So we make both those sizes, and you can kind of get a sense of where they're looking at. These are, you can't really see this. I don't know if they're going to get a copy of this, or if anybody wants a copy, I can give it so you can get the gradations on it. But we screen it down very, very fine. And then we just kind of make sure that we have at least 3.5% residual asphalt when we check the chip. And that's because we want it from 100% wrap. We don't want people bringing in other aggregates that don't have that binder capability. So the biggest issue we have when we get an agency to do it is they all want to do this cleanliness test. They want it wash chip because you're used to having to crush this rock, and then you have a problem with it binding to the asphalt on the roadway. In wrap, we don't want to wash that. It looks dusty, but that dust is all asphalt fines. It leads to a really good bonding as a chip. We do 2 types of wrap chip in California. One is where we just use a standard emulsion. So right before we ship it, we always wet it. Binds a little bit better in the emulsion. But then the other is where we use a hot rubber asphalt. There, you don't want any moisture on there, so we make sure we dry it out. We screen it one more time to make sure it's dry so it's better bonding. But regardless, both of them have excellent bonding because the asphalt on the chip bonds in the asphalt on the roadway. So here's a terminal blend asphalt rubber chip. You can kind of just see what the looks on it. It's darker, it's not black. It's kind of a really dark gray. Some people like the appearance better. And here's just a polymer modified chip sealer, just applied conventionally. It's just using different chip. Just to give you an idea of the texture, when we first used it, we actually started off back in 2004 that we looked at using RAP as slurry and microsurfacing dust, and I'll get into that. And then I was worried when we were looking at the chip that I was afraid, well, you know, when it gets hot, it would actually start, you know, maybe bleeding or that type of thing. Well, what we found is there's not enough binder on there to bleed unless they applied the binder underneath. It's not a problem. But what happens is traffic gets on this roadway, and you can see this roadway, it's been 11 years later, is the traffic actually makes the roadway better looking, because that little asphalt in the conglomerates actually just coat it. So it actually goes from a chip-looking product to maybe like an open grade with time. And it's actually a better appearance when you actually start using RAP chip. We base it out in California right now. LA County went to 100% to it about 6 years ago. San Bernardino County kept looking at it, and finally they decided to go to it, and they did it last year, and they've gone to 100% RAP chip. I will tell you that any agency that I provide the material from, either RAP chip or RAP slurry that we were talking about, never goes back, unless they're in a remote area and the virgin aggregate's just trucking-wise more cost-effective. They all like it. So, give you a few just case here. Here's a scrub seal. Everybody familiar with what a scrub seal is? Okay, it's essentially an emulsion, a chip seal emulsion where you're actually dragging a broom behind, and so it kind of does seal coating, or crack sealing at the same time, because it puts a little wave in front of that broom and fills those cracks. LA County, you can see this is one of their roadways, really beat up. Not a good chip seal candidate, but they needed to put a Band-Aid on it, so they went ahead and put a scrub seal on it. And this is actually now about 7 years later. You can see that it's filled the cracks. You can see them, they reflect through. But this chip all the way down has now prevented moisture infiltration and bought them at least 7 years on this project. You pull out the chips, you have this fine aggregate from the RAP that you can use in slurries and microsurfacing. And we just make a type 2 right now, type 2 aggregate source. And you can see it. This is magnified so that those particles aren't as big as they look on the screen. It's about a number 4 minus. But you don't get a lot of individual conglomerations. It's mostly just small aggregate sources. And the residual asphalt remains constant. So you can see the type 2 aggregate pit out on the road. Few things you got to do differently. One is we put latex in everything, because what happens is you're going to use a lower binder content. You don't have to coat all that aggregate, what typical slurries do. You're going to use a lower binder content. Well, because of that, you have to have a marrying or diffusion between those binders. You need some initial strength, and the latex provides that. The nice thing about it's actually cheaper because the less emulsion you use to go ahead and modify it. The other thing is we rubber tire all our rollers. Rubber tire all our rollers. That would be a good thing, or we couldn't drive them anywhere. We actually put rubber tire roll all of our slurries, again, to get that early retention. The one thing I will tell you with it doesn't happen with the chip, but on slurries, when you stockpile it, you want to make the material relatively fresh, or have a little bit with your loader, a little shifting screen on it, because if you sit it out on the road, the asphalt will start conglomerating in the piles. It'll start setting up on you. So we make our material relatively fresh, or we put a little, we have on our loader a little screening cloth on there to break that up. So if you look at it, you can see that typically for the emulsion loading with RAP, we're about 2 to 4% lower than we are with a conventional aggregate. Again, nothing's used for coating, So you've already got a coated aggregate. Our residual asphalt, though, tends to be on the higher end, and that leads to some of the performance. You can use any conventional equipment, nothing specialized. You just need to make sure that you, the way you process the RAP, it gives you a high quality aggregate. And you can see, I am never going to tell you that it's going to be a black rock. It's going to be black slurry. But what it does do is it ages a little less. You look at this 2 years later, same project where Mirada was looking at switching over. You can look on the conventional slurry, and you can look at the RAP. It just looks a little bit better. You know, that's a very subjective view when people look at it. But again, I'll tell you that any agency who uses it won't go back unless there's just a big cost difference, and that's from a trucking standpoint. I'm going to give you a quick video of LA County that uses, not only did they use RAP chip, they scrub sealed the RAP chip, they actually used a RAP slurry on top of it. And the other thing that they do, and they've gotten to the point where they do it on all projects, is they do it for rideabilities. They micromill the road first. They micromill the road off so they get a real smooth performing roadway and travel surface. So how do you manage the RAP? And there's a couple of different ways. One is some agencies specify just that you have to use RAP products. So the contractor can get it from any source they want. We now probably have 40 different agencies actually specifying a RAP aggregate as their materials, or they'll do it as an alternative, just so that they can make sure that they get the most cost effective. Secondly, is you can utilize it in-house yourself. You can make it. We got some agencies that we go in and process the material. They'll stockpile their wrap, and we'll manufacture it into a chip and slurry for them so they can use it for their own sources. This is just one of our facilities. You can see that we bring in the wraps from different sources and we segregate it into fines and then chips. This is like our typical stock 3/8 or 5/16 chip stockpile on the left side, and then we make the wrap slurry fines on the right side. One of the things we're starting to coin is urban quarries. Is don't use your wrap in small percentages. Set them up, and you can use them directly for yourself. Make that aggregate that's existing in the road that was the best aggregate way back in. Reuse it for you yourself. It's it's your single biggest asset is your roadways, and you have a lot of money in that rock that's existing. This is just like a project that we did for Caltrans. It was a maintenance project, actually I-10, 60,000 plus vehicles a day, Interstate 10. We stripped off the AC in one location. They did a rehab or a milling on that, and then the maintenance wanted to put in a Cape Seal. So we came in and we manufactured both the chip and slurry simultaneously, set up the plant a special way, and then the maintenance crew actually applied the chip and slurry as a Cape Seal on Interstate 10. So some of your best aggregates are in your roads, and this is we have several quarries right now where you can see the housings all around that, and they can't dig anymore, and we're running scarcer and scarcer. So the solution to that is use wrap. There's no reason it can't. It's just rock and oil. Long as you understand the components of it, there's no reason we can't reuse it. My contact's up there if you have any questions. I know FHWA is coming out with a synopsis or a report on it. They've been looking all around. They're trying to get more and more use in pavement preservation.
Do you have any test sites like at MnDOT or at NCAT to see about form versus their virgin aggregate?
I know NCAT has talked to us about doing it. I don't know if it has done. I don't know if, when they're going to, but I've been contacted several times that they want to put down some on the test strips, but I don't think so. We've been using it since 2004 in really high volume areas, and more than welcome to show you all over the state where those have occurred.
This has not been done in the Midwest, and nothing is as easy as it looks, you know. So if you have any advice, if an agency wanted to start to get into this, how they might go about it? I mean, is it as simple as it looks, or you probably have got a lot of experience in it?
The one thing it all kind of gets into the cost of trucking is you need the wrap source, and then you need the site locations. If there's a huge difference between them, there's a disconnect between that, obviously. So the one thing I always caution everybody is just look at where your sources are coming and where there's wrap now. Where the best place to do it is existing hot plants where they can't use as much wrap and they get stockpiles, and you can make it a deal with them. The other is you want to crush it as little as possible. You want to not fracture that aggregate because that is the value. So we always screen first, pull the material off, and then just crush the chip separately, and then we get a little fines from crushing. Other than that, it's not a difficult deal. The reason we got into it is we're a milling contractor, and we were starting to lose some of the milling because some of our competitors were were suppliers. So we needed a source that we could provide wrap credits to our milling operation, so that we could get the milling jobs. And we looked at using hot plants, and they were hard to permit, that type of thing. And so in 2003, we decided that we'd start looking at these other applications, and we started doing it, and once we got agencies start using it, it's one of those things, they just never go back. They like it better. They think it performs longer, and there's no additional cost comparatively. We bid everything, when we bid conventionally against standard aggregates, there's no price difference for application of the RAP. In fact, on slurries, you could go a little cheaper because of the emulsion that you're not using. My biggest advice is just look at where the RAP's coming from and where you're going to place it, and see about the trucking, because that's, I think one is people just never even thought about doing it. But the other is, I don't know the second economic environment is if there's a I don't know if where you're trucking from and where the RAP sources are. That's the big issue. I would clearly think about it if you have an agency that you're doing a roadway rehab and you're gonna do a mill and fill or something like that, is use that value of that material and think about it within your agency to stockpile it someplace so that you can do on another project, you could come in and make this material for your own chipping or your own slurry seals or microsurfacing.
We've done a coal plant, central plant recycling job with RAP in Michigan, and Monroe County just did one too, this last year basically. And I think this year Monroe was gonna try to do RAP chip. So.
Good.
I can answer that. Monroe's already done a RAP chip seal. We did it 3 years ago. Just one of the paving contractors had an excess RAP, and we just basically, like you said, streamed out 3/8 and used HFRS 2P. The thing here in Michigan is, you know, you talk about the trucking, but there's some places where chip seal aggregate is like $50 a ton to get in. And so
Really, is there any open locations that we could look at?
so yeah, so it's
Yeah, that's pretty easy to do the numbers then.
exactly.
I mean, when we're looking at, I'm competing at $13 a ton type chip, so.
The preceding was produced by the National Center for Pavement Preservation. More information can be found on the web at pavementpreservation.org. Additional support provided by Michigan State University.